North Korea has said it will cut all official communication lines with South Korea, including the hotline between the two nations' leaders. The move appears to be in response to propaganda leaflets being flown over the border in balloons by North Korean defectors in the south. Our Seoul correspondent Laura Bicker told us more about the leafleting. For Prince Andrew have rejected claims by US prosecutors that he has not cooperated with the inquiry into sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In a statement, they said the prince has offered help on at least 3 occasions. US authorities have challenged to prove his offer to be interviewed as a witness is serious. Sean Dilley has more. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has rejected calls to defund US police departments following the move by the Democrat-run Minneapolis City Council to dismantle its own police force in the wake of the protests over the death of George Floyd. President Trump has accused Mr. Biden and the Democratic Party of being controlled by the radical left and of having no choice but to back the movement. This is what Joe Biden told Norah O'Donnell from CBS News after meeting George Floyd's family. Tens of thousands of people around the world have been protesting over the death of George Floyd. For many, it's reminded them of the issues they face in their own countries, including their own personal experiences of racism. BBC Minute's Cash Jones reports. During the COVID-19 pandemic, international travel has virtually come to a halt. Today's quarantine restrictions make it even more difficult. So, what is it like to fly at the moment? Our Europe correspondent Jean Mackenzie has taken a number of flights while reporting on COVID-19 for us. She documented her journey back to London last week. Jean Mackenzie reporting. Now back to the UK's handling of the easing of the coronavirus lockdown, with suggestions schools may now not reopen before September, and pubs and restaurants in England are not certain what date they'll be allowed to reopen. Let's discuss it with Linda. The distance that we have in this country, because obviously there are a lot of people who say that reducing it from 2 metres to 1 would make a lot of difference. The World Health Organization says 1 metre. Other countries are using 1 metre or 1.5 metres. Why is it 2 here? German authorities have appealed for more information as they continue their investigation into the disappearance of the British girl Madeleine McCann from a holiday resort in Portugal in 2007. Our correspondent Gavin Lee is in Praia de Luz, where Madeleine went missing 13 years ago, and gave us the latest on this new appeal. A museum in Cambridge has taken life in lockdown to a new artistic level by reimagining how some of the subjects in its paintings would be protecting themselves during the pandemic. So weird, isn't it, how our perspective has changed, that it doesn't look so odd anymore. Time now to say goodbye if you're watching us on BBC World. See you soon. And let's catch up with the weather with Thomas. This is BBC News with Joanna Gosling with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. Hello, welcome if you're watching in the UK or around the world. Stay with us for the latest news and analysis from here and across the globe. The plan for all primary school pupils in England to go back to school before the end of term has been dropped by the government. The Education Secretary Gavin Williamson is expected to confirm the decision in Parliament later today. Instead, schools will be given flexibility over whether or not to admit more pupils. There had been warnings from head teachers that it was not practical. Our education correspondent Sean Coughlin has more. Around 64,000 more people than usual have died in the UK since the COVID-19 outbreak began. The figures from the Office for National Statistics also show less than a fifth of deaths registered in the last week of May involved COVID-19. That was the lowest proportion since the lockdown was imposed. Our head of statistics, Robert Cuff, told me the trend is going in the right direction. Boris Johnson's top team has been meeting this morning. Our assistant political editor Norman Smith joins us from Westminster. The UK and Japan are set to begin post-Brexit trade talks today. Negotiators will hope an agreement will be reached before the end of the year, when the transition period with the EU is set to end. But what about the UK's negotiations with the EU? The 4th round of trade talks ended on Friday, with both sides saying little progress had been made. The Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Margrethe Vestager, says it's very difficult to see what the next steps can be. It's a year since a wave of protests broke out in Hong Kong against the Chinese government's plans to bring in an extradition law. Months of clashes followed. Let's get more on the protests after the death of George Floyd and on the day of his funeral. A controversial Confederate statue has been removed from its public plinth in Louisville, Kentucky. A museum in Cambridge has taken life in lockdown to a new artistic level by reimagining how some of the subjects in its paintings would be protecting themselves during the pandemic. They're beautiful. This is BBC News. And it's time now for a look at the weather with Thomas. Hello, this is BBC News with Joanna Gosling. Our headlines. We'll go to Edinburgh to hear the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Briefing just a few minutes ago, the Health Minister said triple-layer face coverings are being introduced from today in line with World Health Organization advice. Simon McCoy, bye-bye from me. I'll leave you with Thomas Schaffenacker with the weather.